She thought the video was a weapon against my marriage, but in those 7 seconds, I found the ammunition to end his career. I walked into the morning team sink with my laptop and a trap. When the conference room screen flickered to life, the only person frozen in terror was him. I do not get mad, I get even. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I have spent the last decade of my life ensuring that things do not break. At 35 years old, I served as the data compliance supervisor for Vantage Ridge Compliance, a job that required a pathological attention to detail and a complete lack of imagination. I liked facts. I liked audit trails. I liked living in Port Astor, Washington, where the constant rhythmic drum of rain against the window pane provided a reliable soundtrack to my organized life. The gray skies over the Pacific Northwest did not depress me. They made the data on my monitors look sharper. My marriage to Grant Halverson was supposed to be another stable data point. On paper, we were perfect. Grant was 37, an account lead at a major logistics firm, possessing the kind of symmetrical jawline and easy charm that made waitresses forget to charge him for extra drinks. He was the charisma. I was the structure. While he was out charming clients and habitually running 20 minutes late for every commitment he made, I was at home managing the mortgage, the insurance policies, the retirement contributions, and the public perception of our stability. I did not have a temper. I had accuracy. That Tuesday evening started like any other Tuesday. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain. I was reviewing the agenda for the next morning on my tablet. It was going to be a heavy day. We had the quarterly team sync at 9 o'clock in the morning, a hybrid meeting with the department head, legal representatives, and remote stakeholders. The entire session would be recorded, and I was scheduled to share my screen to present the new encryption protocols. My phone buzzed against the granite countertop. I glanced at it, expecting a weather alert. Instead, a security notification from my work email server flashed across the screen. New login attempt detected. My pulse did not jump. I simply reached for the phone to deny access, but before my finger could touch the glass, the notification shifted. Identity verified, login successful. I froze. My physical security key was in my pocket. I had not authorized anything. I immediately checked the access log, but the trail was clean, as if the system had simply hiccuped. A technical glitch. That was the logical explanation. But in my line of work, we do not believe in coincidences. The front door opened, bringing a gust of damp air into the hallway. Grant walked in, shaking his umbrella with a little too much energy. He smelled of rain, expensive steak, and the peppermint gum he always chewed to cover the smell of scotch. "Hey, babe," Grant called out, his voice a little too loud for the quiet room. "Sorry I'm late. Client dinner ran over. You know how Derek gets when he starts talking about golf." He walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at the smart speaker on the counter, then at the router blinking in the corner. "Did we change the Wi-Fi password recently?" he asked. "Opening the fridge? Or the AirPlay code I looked up from my tablet?" "No." "Why just having trouble connecting my phone earlier?" he said, grabbing a sparkling water. "Wanted to make sure I could cast some photos to the TV later. For us to look at." It was a clumsy lie. Grant never looked at photos on the TV. He barely looked at photos at all. He was acting, but he had forgotten his lines. I felt a familiar knot of tension in my stomach, the specific kind reserved for his mother, Lorraine Halverson. Grant had her eyes, but she had the teeth. Lorraine was a woman who believed appearances were the only currency that mattered. Family is a brand. Rowan, she had told me on my wedding day, gripping my hand tight enough to bruise. "You protect the brand. We have the team sync tomorrow," I said, testing the water. "Big presentation. I need the bandwidth clear." Right, Grant said, finally glancing at me. "Big day for you. You're always so diligent." I looked down at my tablet again. The airdrop icon on my screen suddenly lit up blue. It was receiving a handshake request from a device named Guest User. It pulsed for 2 seconds, hovering like a ghost in the machine, and then vanished. Someone was pinging my ecosystem. Someone was testing the perimeter. I looked at Grant. He was leaning against the counter, smiling that practiced, charming smile that had worked on me for 7 years, but his thumb was tapping a rhythm against the side of his soda can. It was a nervous tick. I closed my tablet cover with a soft snap. I do not get paranoid. I get prepared. I work in risk management, and that night, risk walked into my home through the front door. The digital clock on the nightstand read 11:47 at night. The house was silent, wrapped in the heavy, damp darkness of a Pacific Northwest storm, but the silence in the bedroom felt louder than the rain. Grant was asleep beside me. He breathed in a steady, heavy rhythm, his arm thrown carelessly over his eyes, the picture of a man with a clear conscience, or perhaps just a man who believed he was too clever to be caught. My phone vibrated against the mahogany surface of the side table. It was a single, short buzz. I reached for it, turning the screen brightness down to the lowest setting to keep the room dark. It was a message from an unknown number. There was no text initially, just a single emoji, a smirking face. Below it sat a video file. The title of the file was typed out in capital letters. Crude and deliberate, Grant's favorite view. I did not wake him. I did not gasp. I sat up slowly, adjusting the pillow behind my back, and tapped the play button. The video was short, only 7 seconds long. It was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of streetlights filtering through a window and the blue light of a projector screen. The audio was crisp. I heard Grant's voice first. It was that low, throaty laugh he used when he was trying to charm a donor or close a deal. "You are unbelievable," Grant's voice said in the recording, thick with desire. The camera panned. I saw the silhouette of my husband, his shirt unbuttoned, his head thrown back. I saw a woman's hand running through his hair. But my eyes did not linger on the betrayal. I am a compliance officer. My eyes went to the background. Behind Grant's shoulder, illuminated on the wall, was a digital screensaver. It was a rotating 3D logo, a stylized mountain peak with a shield overlay, the Vantage Ridge Compliance internal logo. My stomach turned over, not from heartbreak, but from a sudden, icy realization. They were not in a hotel. They were not in a car. They were in conference room B at my office. A second message popped up on the screen. Brielle Knox. "You keep the husband. I'll keep the rest. Brielle Knox." I knew the name. She was 29 years old, a freelance public relations contractor who handled the youth outreach for my mother-in-law's charity foundation. I had seen her at the Christmas gala, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, laughing at Lorraine's jokes with a practiced tilt of her head. I stared at the phone. Most wives would have thrown the device at the wall. They would have shaken their husband awake, screaming for an explanation. I did neither. I engaged the part of my brain that had made me the best risk assessor in the division. I opened the file properties. I needed the metadata. Date created yesterday. Time 8:15 in the evening. Device iPhone 15 Pro. Location geotagged to Vantage Ridge headquarters, floor 4. I felt a cold calm settle over me. This was not just infidelity. This was unauthorized access to a secure facility after business hours. Grant did not have a security badge for my building. Brielle did not have clearance for the executive conference floor. They had trespassed on company property to mock me, using the very systems I was sworn to protect as the backdrop for their affair. I swiped out of the video and opened my work calendar. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Quarterly team sync. Attendees department head, HR director, and legal counsel. Location conference room. B. The very room where Grant had unbuttoned his shirt a few hours ago. I looked at Grant. He shifted in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. He looked soft, vulnerable. He thought the worst thing that could happen to him was a divorce. He had no idea he had just handed me a violation of corporate policy recorded in high definition. I placed the phone back on the nightstand, face down. I lay back against the pillows, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. I did not close my eyes. If they want to make me the screaming wife, I whispered to the empty room, I will make them the evidence. I slipped out of bed, leaving Grant snoring softly in the darkness. I did not go to the kitchen for water. I went to my home office and opened my laptop. The screen glow was the only light in the room as I created a new encrypted folder. I named it Timeline. I dragged the video file into the folder. Then I added screenshots of the text messages from Brielle. Next, I logged into the server backend to export the access logs from my email. I needed to understand how the login notification from earlier had simply resolved itself. I navigated to the settings menu of my Outlook account, specifically the Rules and Filters tab. My suspicion was correct. A new rule had been created exactly 48 hours ago. It was titled simply System Updates. The command was specific. If sender contains security alert, mark as read and move to archive. Smart. I whispered to the screen. But not smart enough. Grant knew my passwords. He knew I used the same variation of our anniversary for the home devices. I stood up and walked to the living room, picking up the old tablet we kept on the coffee table for controlling the sound system. It was synced to Grant's cloud account. I opened the Recent Files tab. There was a document at the top of the list titled Sync Notes. I tapped it open. It was not a grocery list or a draft for his logistics job. It was a script. It contained bullet points like address Rowan's recent workload and transition to external support. Below that, I found a forwarded calendar invite. Grant had forwarded the internal Zoom link for my team sync to a personal Gmail account. I went back to the video. I needed to see what else was in the room. I played the clip again, pausing it at the 4-second mark. I maximized the window and adjusted the contrast. There, reflected in the dark glass of the conference room wall, was a visitor badge lying on the mahogany table. It was a standard-issue generic vendor pass, but someone had written initials on the white strip in thick black marker B.K. I switched tabs to the company meeting agenda. As the meeting organizer, I had full administrative view. I scrolled down to the schedule. Grant had added a 15-minute slot right after my compliance update. Item guest presenter, PR and brand safety update. Requested by Grant Halverson. External guest Brielle Knox. I sat back in my chair. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. They were not just having an affair. They were planning a public execution. Brielle was coming to the meeting tomorrow. She was going to present a PR update, which would likely frame my recent compliance strictness as instability or stress, effectively undermining my authority in front of legal counsel and my boss. If I reacted to her presence, if I showed anger or shock, I would look like the unhinged wife they were painting me to be. My phone buzzed again. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. The name Lorraine flashed on the screen. "You are up late." "Lorraine," I murmured. I opened the message. "Hope you are sleeping well. Darling, remember to eat a good breakfast before your big meeting. You have seemed so fragile lately. We just want you to be safe." I stared at the word fragile. It was the final piece of the puzzle. This was a coordinated attack. The video sent by Brielle was not just a taunt. It was leverage. They wanted me to see it, to be devastated, to come into that meeting red-eyed and shaking. They wanted me to crumble so they could step in and save the company from my breakdown. I closed the laptop with a decisive click. I was not going to crumble. "You want a show," I said to the empty office. "I will give you a production." I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus, a senior systems administrator in our IT department. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, but Marcus owed me a favor from an audit I had helped him survive last year. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Rowan, is everything okay? I am sorry to wake you." "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady and low, "I have a compliance question that cannot wait until morning. I need to know the exact retention protocols for the audio-visual recording system in Conference Room B. Specifically, does the system log local access attempts to the hard drive? Yeah, Marcus stammered. It logs everything. Why did a recording fail, Kay? I replied, I suspect there has been a data leak and unauthorized use of the facility. I need you to pull the raw logs for the last 48 hours and have them ready for me before the team sync. Do not flag this to anyone else yet. I want to verify the breach first. Okay, I will handle it. Do you want me to wipe the cache? Absolutely not. I said, touch nothing. Preserve the chain of custody. I hung up and turned back to my laptop. The heist was in motion. I opened my standard presentation deck titled Weekly Compliance Updates. It was boring. It was predictable. It was perfect camouflage. I filled the first 5 slides with standard charts about data encryption and password hygiene. Then, I created a 6th slide. I titled it simply Incident Summary, Unauthorized Access and Policy Violations. I set the slide to hidden mode so it would not appear in the preview but would launch instantly if I manually keyed in the slide number during the show. Next came the video. I imported the file Brielle had sent me into my editing software. I did not want to show pornography. I wanted to show a violation. I carefully cropped the frame and applied a heavy blur to the lower half of the screen, obscuring the sexual act but leaving Grant's face and the Vantage Ridge logo on the wall perfectly sharp. I cut the audio track, removing the moans and the dialogue, leaving only the dead silence of the room and the timestamp burned into the corner. To ensure no one could accuse me of faking the footage, I ran the file through a checksum utility. I generated a SHA-256 hash, a digital fingerprint that would prove the core video data had not been altered, only redacted for privacy. I saved the hash key in a separate text file. I opened my work email and composed a message to the legal department, CCing the HR director. Subject urgent notification, potential asset misappropriation, and email tampering. Body I have identified irregularities regarding the use of Conference Room B after business hours, as well as unauthorized modifications to my email filtering rules. I will be presenting physical evidence of these security breaches during the morning sync to ensure immediate containment. I did not mention my husband. I did not mention the affair. I hit send. I transferred the logs, the redacted video, the original video, and the hash key onto a secure USB drive. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet, slipping the drive into the inner pocket of my navy blue blazer. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Grant appeared in the doorway of the office, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing his pajama bottoms, looking soft and harmless. "Babe," he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "You are still up. It is 3 a.m. Just finishing the deck," I said, not looking away from the screen as I shut down the laptop. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. It was a performance. He was playing the role of the supportive husband, ensuring the victim was calm before he led her to the slaughter. "You work too hard," Grant said. "Hey, after this meeting tomorrow, let's go to that seafood place on the pier. Just the 2 of us. I know I have been distracted lately. I want to make it up to you." I looked at his hand on my shoulder, then up at his face. He smiled, a little boyish, a little tired. He had no idea that his career was currently sitting in my pocket on a flash drive. "That sounds fine, Grant," I said. "Good." He kissed the top of my head. "Come to bed. You need your rest." He turned and walked back upstairs. I watched him go. He was right. I needed to be rested. Tomorrow. I did not need to scream. I did not need justice. I needed minutes. I needed a permanent, corporate record that would outlive his lies. The fluorescent lights of the Vantage Ridge office hummed with a frequency that usually soothed me. But that morning, the air felt thin. I sat at my desk, organizing the cables of my laptop when a calendar notification popped up on my primary monitor. Subject Mandatory Wellness Check-in from Human Resources. Context. To discuss concerns regarding personal stress levels and their potential impact on departmental output, I stared at the screen. They were fast. Lorraine had clearly made a call before business hours. The invite was scheduled for 11 o'clock in the morning, exactly 1 hour after the team sync. The narrative was already being constructed. I was the unstable wife. The woman cracking under pressure, the liability. I stood up to get coffee. The walk to the break room was usually filled with casual greetings, but today, silence followed me like a shadow. As I passed the marketing cluster, conversation stopped abruptly. I saw heads dip. I saw a chat window being minimized with a frantic click. They knew. The rumor mill had done its work. They were waiting for the explosion. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Grant. Rowan, please, don't do anything crazy. We can talk about this tonight. Don't make me ashamed of you. I did not reply. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was bitter, just the way I needed it to be. Another ping. This time, an email notification marked high importance. It was from the external mail server addressed to the CEO, with me copied on the line, from Lorraine Halverson, the Halverson Foundation, subject strategic partnership and gala sponsorship. Dear David, our family believes deeply in the mission of Vantage Ridge. We would like to propose a significant sponsorship for the upcoming fiscal year. My daughter-in-law, Rowan, will act as the primary liaison to ensure our family values are properly represented. I read between the lines instantly. It was a bribe wrapped in a threat. If I exposed her son or caused a scene, I would be sabotaging a major financial deal for my own company. She was buying my silence with a donation check. She was banking on my professionalism being stronger than my pride. She was right about the professionalism, but she was wrong about the objective. I walked back to my desk, standing there, leaning against my cubicle wall with the ease of someone who owned the place. Was Brielle Knox? She looked perfect. She was wearing a tailored cream suit that probably cost 2 months of my mortgage. She held a guest badge that had been printed 5 minutes ago. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rowan, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You look tired. I am focused, I replied, not breaking my stride. She stepped into my path, forcing me to stop. The scent of her expensive perfume was suffocating. Look, Brielle whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. You can just be quiet, and I will make sure this story becomes flattering for you. Maybe you and Grant are working through things. Maybe you are the bigger person. Be the adult, Rowan. Nobody likes a messy woman. I looked at her. I looked at the guest badge clipped to her lapel. I did not feel jealousy. I felt the cold, hard click of a lock engaging. Brielle, I asked, my voice flat and monotone. That clip you sent, did you send it from your personal phone or a burner? Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She blinked. The question was too technical. It was not the question of a heartbroken wife. Why does that matter? She stammered, laughing nervously. It is in the cloud now. Does it matter? No, I said. Just curious about the metadata. I stepped around her and walked toward the glass doors of conference room B. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, confused and unsettled. She thought this was a social game. She thought she was walking onto a stage to perform a dramatic monologue about love and modern relationships. I pushed open the heavy door and plugged my laptop into the main console. The massive screen on the wall flickered to life, mirroring my desktop. I checked the connection status. I checked the audio output. Brielle and Grant were playing a game of reputation. They did not understand where they were standing. This was not her stage. This was my system. The atmosphere in conference room B was suffocating. David, our department head, sat at the head of the mahogany table, tapping his pen against a leather notebook. To his right sat the director of legal affairs, A woman named Sarah who wore glasses thick enough to see into the future. Grant sat across from me, his posture rigid, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Next to him, Brielle sat with her legs crossed, projecting an air of bored elegance, though her eyes darted nervously toward the camera mounted on the ceiling. "All right, let's get started," David said, checking his watch. "Rowan, we are tight on time. Why don't you lead us off with the compliance updates I reached for the HDMI cable?" But before I could connect my laptop, Grant stood up. The motion was abrupt, almost violent. "Actually, David," Grant said, his voice a little too high, a little too eager. "If I could, just jump in for a second, Brielle, and I have a really exciting PR demo that sets the context for everything else. I think it would be better if we went first." To set the mood, he was trying to hijack the meeting. He wanted to spin the narrative, present Brielle as a savior, and paint me as the obstacle before I even opened my mouth. I looked at him. I did not fight. I did not argue. I simply folded my hands on the table. "Of course," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Please, go ahead." Grant blinked, surprised by my surrender. As he fumbled to connect his device, I reached out and pressed the large, glowing button on the center console. A robotic voice announced to the room, "Recording in progress." "All screen shares are being archived." Grant froze. "Rowan, do we really need to record a brainstorm session?" "It feels restrictive." "Policy." "Grant," I said, smiling tightly. "All external vendor presentations must be logged." "Proceed." He rushed through his presentation. It was fluff buzzwords about brand synergy and family values. Brielle nodded along, occasionally chiming in with rehearsed lines about modernizing the corporate image. When they finished, the room offered polite, scattered applause. "Great," David said, looking bored. "Rowan, you're up." I plugged in my laptop. My desktop appeared on the massive 4-foot screen behind me. "The weekly encryption stats are in the green," I began, clicking through the first 5 slides rapidly. "Audit trails are clean. However, we have a significant agenda item regarding physical security." I hit the next slide. The screen went black, displaying only white text incident summary, unauthorized access. "Rowan, what is this?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "Last night," I said. Our perimeter was breached. I clicked play. The redacted video filled the screen. It was silent. The heavy blur obscured the indecency, but the clarity of the remaining details was devastating. Everyone saw Grant's face, undeniable and distinct. Everyone saw the Vantage Ridge logo glowing on the wall behind him. Everyone saw the timestamp in the corner, 8:15 in the evening. The room went deathly silent. It was the kind of silence where you could hear the hum of the hard drives in the server rack. Grant's face drained of all color. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff. Brielle let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. It is just a private misunderstanding. A joke." She looked at David, her eyes wide and pleading. "We were just fooling around. It is personal." I turned to her, my expression void of any emotion. "This is not personal." "Brielle," I said, "this is a Class A security violation." I turned to Sarah. "We have an external vendor and an employee using a secure conference room after hours for non-business activities. They did not sign the visitor log at the front desk. They bypassed the security checkpoint." "Who authorized this?" Sarah asked, her voice sharpening into a blade. She was no longer looking at the screen. She was looking at Grant. I minimized the video and pulled up the access log. The request for guest presenter was submitted yesterday. I explained, highlighting the line on the screen. It was authorized by Grant Halverson's account. He used his credentials to bypass the lockdown protocol for a person who has no clearance to be on this floor. Grant stammered, his charm evaporating under the harsh fluorescent lights. I just wanted to show her the facilities. We were brainstorming. You were filming. I corrected him. I looked at the table, making eye contact with every executive in the room. And that is the real risk. If they felt comfortable enough to film this kind of content in our secure war room. I let the sentence hang in the air for a second, letting the implication sink in. Then they were comfortable enough to do other things here. I finished softly. Do we know what data was on the screens they were ignoring? Do we know if they plugged any unverified devices into the ports to charge their phones? Because I do not know. And that terrifies me. The silence in the room was shattered by the aggressive vibration of my phone against the hard surface of the conference table. It was not a text message. It was a Priority 1 alert from the internal messaging system. I looked down. The message was from Marcus in IT. Active threat detected. Attempted remote wipe of meeting logs in progress. I did not look at Grant. I looked at the large screen behind me. David, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Please instruct the IT department to lock the server immediately. We have an active intrusion. What David asked, blinking rapidly. What are you talking about? Someone is currently attempting to remotely delete the access logs for this room to destroy the evidence of the entry last night, I explained, typing furiously to bring up the live activity feed. And it is not Grant. A command line appeared on the main screen, scrolling with red text. The user ID attempting the deletion was clear. Guest or admin L. Halverson. I felt a cold smile touch the corners of my mouth. It was not a hacker. It was a temporary administrator account issued to our strategic partners. That account belongs to Lorraine Halverson, I announced. She is not just funding a charity gala. She is actively accessing Vantage Ridge internal servers to scrub data that incriminates her son. Brielle let out a noise that sounded like a strangled bird. She stood up, knocking her expensive leather notebook onto the floor. No, that is not right, Brielle stammered, her face pale. Marge told me. She said, if I just sent the clip, you would get scared and back down. She said you would be too embarrassed to look. The room turned to her. She had slipped. Marge. Only close family and sycophants called Lorraine by her nickname. Marge, Sarah from legal asked, lowering her glasses. You are admitting to conspiring with an external partner to harass an employee and manipulate company data. Grant slammed his hand on the table, trying to regain control of a ship that was already sinking. This is insane, he shouted. You are listening to Rowan. She is paranoid. She tracks my location. She controls my finances. I had to find a way out because she is suffocating me. He was playing the victim card. It was a desperate, ugly throw. Is that so? I asked softly. I clicked the remote one more time. A new document appeared on the screen. It was a digital receipt from our joint bank account, dated 3 days ago. If I am so controlling, Grant, then explain this transaction, I said. A transfer of $5,000 to the law firm of Dalloway and Associates. They specialize in high-asset divorce litigation. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And look at the metadata, I continued, pointing to the bottom of the invoice. The transaction was not authorized from your phone. It was authorized from an IP address ending in 44. That is the static IP address for the Wi-Fi at your mother's house. I turned to David. This is not a marriage dispute. This is a coordinated attack. My mother-in-law used our joint funds to hire a divorce attorney for my husband, and then used her partner access to our company system to try and cover up his infidelity so he could claim I was the unstable one. David looked sick. This involves marital assets and corporate fraud. Sarah stood up. Her face was made of stone. Meeting adjourned. Sarah declared, Grant, Brielle, you will step out into the hallway with me immediately. Do not touch your phones. Do not touch your laptops. But Grant started. Now Sarah barked. As they were ushered out, looking like scolded children. The HR director turned to me. Her voice was gentle, the kind you use on a wounded animal. "Rowan," she said, "maybe you should take the rest of the day off. Go home. Rest. We can handle this." I looked at her. I looked at the empty chairs where my husband and his mistress had just been sitting. "No," I said firmly. "I am not going home. If I leave, the narrative changes. I want every single word of this meeting transcribed and added to the official compliance record." My phone pinged again. A new email. It was a company-wide blast. Invitation Strategic Partnership Brunch. Hosted by Lorraine Halverson. Today at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Come celebrate the union of Vantage Ridge and the Halverson Foundation. I read the bottom line. Liaison Rowan Mercer. She was doubling down. She was hosting a public event in 3 hours to announce a partnership with the very company she was currently hacking, and she had listed me as the face of it. She thought she could force me to smile and shake hands to save face. I closed my laptop. I am not going home. I repeated, I have a brunch to attend. I met May Caldwell in the parking lot of the Briarstone Country Club 20 minutes before the event was scheduled to begin. May was not a warm woman. She was a shark in a silk blouse, a lawyer who specialized in reputation management and high-stakes divorce. She looked at the tablet I was holding and nodded approval. "We do not go in there to make a scene," May said, adjusting her glasses. "We go in there to conduct business. If they want to merge the family and the company, we will treat the family like a business asset. And assets get audited." I had spent the last hour preparing a document titled External Partner Risk Assessment. It sounded dry. It sounded like the kind of bureaucratic paperwork that executives skimmed over while drinking mimosas. That was the point. It was a Trojan horse. We walked into the private dining hall. The room was bathed in golden light, smelling of expensive lilies and roasted lamb. Lorraine Halverson stood in the center of the room, holding a champagne flute, radiating the benevolent glow of a matriarch. She was telling a story to the CEO of Vantage Ridge, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Rowan has just been under so much pressure," I heard her say as we approached. "We want to make sure the foundation supports her department specifically. To take the load off." She spotted me. Her smile did not waver, but her eyes hardened. "Rowan," she exclaimed, opening her arms, "I am so glad you felt well enough to come." Grant was standing next to her. He looked washed out, his earlier bravado from the conference room gone, replaced by a desperate need to stick to the script. He rushed forward, arms outstretched, attempting to envelop me in a hug before the entire executive board. "Honey," Grant said, his voice loud enough to carry to the back of the room, "I was so worried. I am glad you are here." He wanted me to flinch. He wanted me to pull away so he could look like the rejected, suffering husband trying to comfort his cold, unstable wife. I did not pull away. I simply stood rigid, my arms at my sides, holding my tablet against my chest like a shield. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of a doctor looking at a biopsy. "Hello, Grant," I said flatly. "We need to review the terms of the partnership before the signing ceremony." I stepped around him and walked directly to the CEO. "David," I said, "before we accept the endowment from the Halverson Foundation, my legal counsel has advised that we review the compliance risks associated with external donor access." May stepped forward, her smile razor sharp. "Standard procedure, of course. Given the recent irregularities involving the donor's family members." Lorraine laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. "Oh, honestly, is this necessary now? We are here to celebrate. It is required for due diligence," I said. I connected my tablet to the room's smart screen. I did not ask for permission. I simply overrode the rotating slideshow of charity photos. The screen shifted to a stark white slide with black text, risk factors, system interference, and conflict of interest. "We have detected unauthorized administrative access originating from the donor's private residence," I stated, my voice projecting clearly across the silent room. We also have evidence of falsified protocol requests and potential legal exposure regarding the use of company funds for personal litigation. The room went quiet. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Lorraine's smile froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table toward me, covering my tablet. "Rowan, darling," Lorraine said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper that only those close by could hear. "This is a statement of health. It just says that you are currently seeking therapy for your stress and that any accusations you make are a result of exhaustion. Sign it, and we can forget this little presentation. We can get you the help you need. It was the final trap. If I signed, I discredited myself forever. If I refused, she would claim I was being difficult and uncooperative." I looked at the paper. Then I looked at May. May nodded imperceptibly. "I cannot sign that. Lorraine," I said. "However, there is an alternative." I tapped my screen. A new document appeared. It was a sworn affidavit. "This is a confirmation that neither you nor any agent of the Halverson Foundation has accessed the Vantage Ridge internal servers in the last 48 hours, I said. "If you sign this confirming on the record that you did not try to delete the meeting logs this morning, then I will step down." I held out a pen. "Sign it," I challenged her. "Commit perjury in front of the CEO and legal counsel. Or admit that you are the security threat." Lorraine stared at the pen. Her hand twitched. The benevolent grandmother mask cracked. Her face twisted into a snarl of genuine, ugly rage. "I do not answer to you," she snapped, her voice shrill and piercing. "I am the reason this company has funding. If I want to look at a few files to protect my son from a vindictive—" She stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. She had not just raised her voice. She had admitted intent. She had admitted entitlement. I looked at the CEO. David was staring at Lorraine Halverson as if he were seeing a stranger. The sweet, charitable old woman had vanished, replaced by someone who believed her money put her above the law. "Thank you for the clarification," I said, retracting the pen. That is all the data we needed. The mediation room was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and stale coffee. It was a neutral ground designed to de-escalate conflict, but as I sat next to May Caldwell, I knew we were not here for peace. We were here for the transcript. Lorraine had requested this closed-door session, believing that away from the eyes of the company board, she could bully me back into submission. She did not understand that a certified mediator was also a certified witness. Lorraine swept into the room with the confidence of a woman who had never been told no. Grant trailed behind her, looking less like a husband and more like a piece of carry-on luggage. Lorraine placed a heavy leather folder on the table. "Let's dispense with the theatrics," Lorraine said, smoothing her skirt. "I have had our family attorneys draft a retroactive power of attorney. It clarifies that as the matriarch of the Halverson Trust, I have administrative oversight on all family assets, including Grant's household accounts, including the digital ones." She pushed the papers toward the mediator. She was trying to legalize a hack. I remained silent. I had instructed May to let them speak. In compliance work, you do not interrupt the person who is busy digging their own grave. "So," the mediator said, looking at the documents, "you are claiming you had implied consent to access Mrs. Mercer's work email and bank accounts because they are family assets?" "It is all the same pot," Lorraine said dismissively. "Grant is my son. His wife is an extension of him. If I need to move funds to protect him, or manage a little PR crisis to keep the family name clean, that is my right. Rowan is just confused about the hierarchy." Grant looked at me across the table. His eyes were wet, pleading. He saw the coldness in my face, and panic set in. He needed a scapegoat. "It wasn't my idea," Grant blurted out, his voice cracking. "It was Brielle. She seduced me, Rowan. She told me it would be fun. She said the video was just a joke. He reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. Rowan, baby, do not ruin my life over a mistake. I am the victim here too. It was pathetic. It was the sound of a man who would burn the world to save his own comfort. Actually, May interrupted, her voice sharp. We have another party who would disagree with that characterization. May opened the door. Brielle Knox walked in. She did not look like the confident PR specialist from yesterday. She looked terrified. She had realized that in a war between a wife and a mother-in-law, the mistress is usually the first casualty. I am not going down for this, Brielle said, her voice shaking. She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. I have the chat logs. Read them. She scrolled to a conversation thread named Project Clean Slate. Read the timestamp from 3 days ago, Brielle said, pointing a manicured finger at Lorraine. Lorraine told me to send the clip. She said, break her spirit before the meeting. Make her look unstable so we can get her to sign the power of attorney. Lorraine's face turned a violent shade of red. You ungrateful little stop, May commanded. She turned her body toward Lorraine, blocking her view of Brielle. May looked at the mediator, then fixed her gaze on Lorraine. Mrs. Halverson, I have one question for the record. Do you have a single piece of paper, signed by Rowan Mercer, explicitly authorizing you to impersonate her on a secure corporate server, or to authorize expenditures from her account? Lorraine slammed her hand on the table. I do not need a piece of paper, she screamed. Losing all control. She is his wife. She belongs to this family. She has to take it because I pay the bills. The room went deadly silent. The mediator stopped typing. She has to take it, I repeated softly. I opened my laptop. I did not look at Lorraine. I looked at the mediator. I would like to enter one final piece of evidence into the record, I said. I pressed play. It was the recording from the Team Sync earlier that morning. It showed the command line of the Vantage Ridge server. It showed the red alert text unauthorized deletion attempt. User guest admin LL Halverson. This is not a family dispute, I said, my voice steady. This is a recording of Lorraine Halverson attempting to destroy federal compliance records to cover up a felony fraud, and she just admitted on the record that she felt entitled to do it. The mediator closed his notebook with a final heavy thud. I am stopping this session immediately, the mediator said, his face pale. Mrs. Halverson, under state regulations, I am a mandatory reporter for suspected financial fraud and corporate cybercrime. I cannot mediate a crime in progress. I have to call the authorities. Lorraine's mouth fell open. The blood drained from her face. She looked at Grant, but he had put his head in his hands. She looked at me, and for the first time, she did not see an extension of her son. She saw the person who had just canceled her. May Caldwell slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany table. It hit the surface with a heavy, final sound that echoed in the silent room. Here's the settlement, May said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Grant, you will vacate the residence within 24 hours. You will waive all claims to Rowan's premarital assets, including her retirement fund and the property in Port Astor. Lorraine, you will immediately reimburse the $5,000 you misappropriated from the joint account. You will sign a permanent non-disparagement agreement. In exchange, Rowan will not personally file criminal charges for the identity theft. May paused, looking over the rims of her glasses. However, we cannot stop Vantage Ridge from conducting their own internal investigation regarding the data breach. Lorraine let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She snatched the paper and ripped it in half. You are bluffing! Lorraine spat, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom. I will call Arthur Sterling. He is the most vicious litigator in the state. I will tell David that you abused your administrative privileges to spy on my son. I will drag your name through the mud until you are unhireable. You think you can blackmail me? I am the donor. I watched her tantrum with the detached interest of a biologist observing a specimen under a microscope. I did not raise my voice. I simply turned my laptop screen toward them. You missed one detail in the video. "Lorraine," I said softly, "you were so focused on the affair that you forgot to look at the work." I pointed to the reflection in the glass wall behind Grant's head in the video. "Look closely at the monitor Grant left on." I instructed. That is a live client dashboard. Specifically, it displays the financial compliance data for the Meridian Health account. That is highly sensitive, protected health information. Grant squinted at the screen, and I saw the blood drain from his face until he was the color of ash. By filming a sex tape in that room with an unauthorized civilian present, I continued. You did not just break a rule. You violated federal privacy laws. That is a Level 1 compliance breach. The company cannot bury this. Lorraine. If they do, they lose their license. It is over. The mediator stood up, signaling the end of the session. He looked at Grant with undisguised pity. "I have to file the report," the mediator said. "The evidence of a data compromise is irrefutable." My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Vantage Ridge legal team. "Grant." I read aloud from the screen. "Your access badge has been deactivated effective immediately. Security is packing up your desk. You are suspended pending termination for gross negligence." I looked at Brielle, who was shrinking into her chair. "And Brielle," I added, "your contract is voided. Your name has been added to the corporate blacklist. You will never work for a Fortune 500 company again." Lorraine stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her power, her money, her influence, none of it mattered against a time-stamped violation of federal law. The brunch invitation she had sent out was no longer a power move. It was now evidence that she had tried to manipulate a company she had actively compromised. Grant stood up, his legs shaking. He reached out to me, tears streaming down his face. "Rowan, please," he choked out. "You have to help me explain. I didn't know the screen was on. I can fix this. Just tell them it was a mistake. We are a team, right?" I looked at the man I had washed socks for, the man I had balanced budgets for, the man I had loved for 7 years. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a hollow, peaceful silence. "I do not pay for your choices anymore. Grant," I said. Lorraine lunged forward, her hand clawing toward the laptop to grab the evidence. "Do not touch that," May barked, her voice cracking like a whip. "We are still recording one more step, and you go from civil liability to criminal assault." Lorraine froze. She looked at the mediator, then at the camera, and finally realized she was trapped. I picked up the pen. I signed the divorce petition with a steady hand. I signed the restraining order application. Then, I handed the USB drive containing the full, unredacted timeline to the mediator to pass along to the authorities. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I did not say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of the conference room and into the cool air of the hallway. I took out my phone and opened the smart home app. I found the user profile labeled Grant. I pressed delete. Access revoked. The connection was cut. The noise was gone. For the first time in a long time, I was walking into a silence that belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Rowan's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.